morning. First, I want to apologize for my poor pronunciation. So, dear friends, it's certainly very exciting to hear with you in Istanbul, a city whose name has resonated around the world this year as a symbol of the will and action of citizens to take charge of their future. I am here to represent the Forum Against Unnecessary Imposed Mega Projects, an international network of communities across Spain, France, Italy, the UK, Germany, Romania, Morocco and beyond. I would first like to thank the organizer for inviting me, both personally and on behalf of the organizations that make up this forum. Movement and associations that collaborate in the Forum Against Unnecessary Imposed Mega Projects actively oppose the imposition of massive infrastructure projects such such as the HS2 rail scheme in the UK, the new Lyon-Turin rail line, the airport of Notre-Dame-des-Landes, the Stuttgart 21 train station, the tunnel under the fixed Fehmarnbelt link, the Bordeaux-Spain high-speed train, the tunnel under Old Florence, and more. The projects that we oppose are unnecessary because they do not meet the real needs of the populations, but instead divert vital public funds to mega schemes that are first and foremost about generating private mega profits. And imposed because citizens are excluded from real influence in both the analysis of the transport problem and in the democratic identification of the way to address that. The official justification for this new infrastructure project is in every case based on false cost-benefit analysis, fanciful capacity and demand figures and mythical job creation claims, a situation of permanent deception. These mega projects are framed so as to guarantee exorbitant profits for large industrial and financial groups, granted by public funds and leading to public debt. On the other hand, they destroy small and medium-sized enterprises and locally based economic systems, which generally create more employment and permit more equitable local development. This project criminalizes dissent while giving privileged access to powerful interests through lobbying and political influence. In some cases, this certainly extends to the mafia. Faced with the serious social conflicts that this project causes, governments and administration have operated arrogantly behind closed doors and treated proposals by citizens with contempt. We can use this summary to apply to all these projects. No business case, no economic case, no environmental case, no democratic case, no social case, no money to pay for it. The symbol of our forum is the white elephant, which in part of Asia is an idiom for gifts that are useless, likely to bankrupt the recipient, called sacred, and cannot be refused. A perfect symbol for so many of the 10T projects that we oppose in Europe. The story of mega project has its roots in the distant past, in the archaeological remains of a civilization of the Mediterranean, as are examples, but without a doubt, today, when we speak of mega project, we are not referring to the monuments erected for the glory of gods, pharaohs and emperors. Those powerful individuals built this grand project during their reign for their own glory and to be remembered for what they gave to their people using the work of their subjects, ports, roads, aqueducts and bridges. Projects that were certainly necessary and useful at the time and still largely are today. Based on these references to the past, we can say that the notion of necessity and usefulness of realizing great projects has changed over time and space. Over time, because many countries on our planet over the centuries have developed sufficient infrastructure networks to meet their needs, which must naturally be maintained and in some cases modernized. Over space, because even in the southern hemisphere, once called developing countries or third world, where you imagine that there is a great need for infrastructure, the mega projects of today are only useful to those who realize them and have never sought the opinion of local citizens. This premise is necessary to understand that the theme of unnecessary imposed mega projects is varied in the northern and southern hemisphere. It's a theme that runs across the planet. I recall the struggles against dams of the Narmada River in India, a project of the 80s, initially financed by the World Bank, which provided for a system of more than 3,000 dams along the Narmada River, which flows for more than 1,300 kilometers through 3 different states of India, and was intended to totally change the hydrology and the morphology of the Gujarat Valley. This is but one example. Tens, hundreds and thousands of others can be given for every part of the planet. As stated by Luca Mercalli, an expert from Italy, on the processes of modification of the territories and as a result of climate change, in the 90s there was a shift. A large project was no longer an answer to a problem shared with a local or national community, and an unnecessary project no longer embodied the need for sublime beauty. Rather, it became a monster that lived on its own and turned itself into a mere opportunity for profit. We have now entered the age of the unnecessary megaproject. This is possible because of a fusion between technological possibilities and financial shenanigans, bogus money created on paper through loans that will rest on the shoulders of future generations. Most of the large projects of the 21st century are promoted exploiting the rhetorical trend of progress and modernity. Money is absorbed by the taxpayer in a hidden way without any explanation about the weight of infrastructural excess on public finance. So damages become irreversible. National debt, overbuilding agricultural land, air, water and soil pollution, waste of energy and valuable raw materials, waste production, landscape devastation. An unnecessary mega-project turns itself into a bottomless pit that absorbs resources and produces new damage and critical situation in an overcrowded world. This invasion of large-scale projects hails from the affirmation of neoliberal globalization that has redefined and limited time and space on our planet. In this sense, the relations between countries are no longer negotiated through experiences, tradition and bilateral negotiations, but by the rule of the neoliberal policies imposed by the World Trade Organization, which is involved in every human activity and goes far beyond trade. Unnecessary imposed mega projects have become part of the method, along with information technology, to increase the speed and fluidity of economical trade by land, sea and air, in accordance with the principle of growth as the only positive value. In many parts of the planet, citizens are rebelling against the grand projects that have been imposed on their lives. Their struggles, geographically distant from each other and often mutually uninformed, need however to be known to increase the chances of being successful. A fight that has no name, a struggle that is little known beyond its scope, has less chance to create solidarity around it and be successful. These reflections are the basis of the establishment in 2011 of the Forum Against Unnecessary Imposed Megaprojects. Faced with the changes, combating unnecessary imposed megaprojects is, therefore, a real historical necessity, as it is to fight against nuclear power, against the privatization of water, and so on. I come from a struggle that began 24 years ago in the Alpine Valley in northwestern Italy on the border with France. At the end of the 80s, political parties and a group of businessmen decided that it was necessary to construct a new railway line to give the northwest of Italy access to Europe, deliberately forgetting that there was already a largely underused railway line. And to be really truly modern, they imagined a high-speed passenger service so that they could go from Milan to Turin and then to Lyon or Paris more quickly. Over time, project promoters realized that the passengers would have been too few, so they decided to modify the plan, turning into a freight line. But even so, the goods were so few that the promoters eventually presented it as a mixed line with a significant increase in costs. The project planned to build, among other things, a tunnel of 57 kilometers. Its cost is estimated to date at 26.1 billion euros, equivalent to 3 nuclear power plants, and is inevitably destined to grow. The citizens of Val di Susa realized the nature of this project and the damages that would be sustained by their valley, and immediately organized their opposition. Lisa Riemma will talk about the movement in detail in the panel overview of megaprojects in Turkey and in Europe later today. I would like to remind you at this juncture that the mass mobilization of the people of Val di Susa could not in any way remain within a small territory. Almost by accident, in 2009, we came into contact with the reality of a similar struggle in the south of France, on the Atlantic, 800 kilometers from Val di Susa. Citizens of the Basque Country, French and Spanish, fought against the construction of a new railway line. Together, we developed a document called the Charter of Andai, from the name of the town where it was signed, on January 23, 2010. Which contains the first joint reflection against these mighty projects, not only of railways but also motorways, airport and superports. This document contains a summary of the reason for our opposition, stating that these projects constitute an ecological, socio-economic and human disaster for the territories they cross, will destroy natural spaces and agricultural lands and represent a new barrier with harmful effects and degradation for the environment, with important negative impacts for local residents, are unable to lead to the participation of the population in decision processes, are imposed by the governments and the administration opacally to the exclusion of the arguments and proposals of citizens. In addition, the official justification for the construction of these new lines is presented adopting false hypotheses about the traffic and underestimation cost of accomplishment in order to sell better a project whose real utility has not been demonstrated. The priority granted to high-speed rail, or HSR, is done at a colossal cost, to the detriment of the traffic of proximity and of priority given to the maintenance and development of existing railway networks, which are neither maintained nor optimized, so as to develop a transport of freight that would support the territories and the public transport service that is accessible to all. The construction of HSR falls under a perpetual search for large infrastructure, motorway, enlargement of the airport, superport, canals, Istanbul, for instance, and is contrary to the concept of sustainable development. We oppose the aberrant expansion of transportation networks provoked by globalized capitalism and which does not allow for uniform local development, but on the contrary support abnormal concentration of traffic and production and the savage delocalization. But the citizens are not only opposed, they also present specific proposals saying they want regeneration, maintenance and optimization of existing lines, which is the most acceptable alternative solution from an environmental point of view, and with much lower financial cost than the construction of new lines. The decrease of transportation, together with a major transformation of the economic and social model, particularly by giving priority to proximity and to relocalizing the economy, and especially restoration of the capacity of making decisions to the most directly affected population, the foundation of an authentic democracy and local autonomy in front of an imposed development model. Hundreds of organizations in France, Spain, Italy, Germany, the UK, and elsewhere have adopted the Charter of Andai as a point of reference for their actions. Over the last 3 years, our forum has held a series of international meetings where citizens have discussed this mega project. We have found that the problems that we face are not unique to each different situation, but all have common features. In the summer of 2011, Presidio Europa Notav, the working group that I belong to and which maintains contact with other struggles on an international level in relation with the European institution, organized the first forum against useless imposed mega project in Val di Susa. The purpose of this first international meeting was to begin to analyze the EU IMP from different points of view and at the same time allow for an exchange of experiences on the form of the struggle implemented, as we will do here today, tomorrow. Among the topics examined, it is appropriate to mention a few. The democratic problem. According to Alessandro Agostino, an Italian professor of constitutionalism, those who struggle against a necessary mega project are fighting for an effective democracy, exercising what is the essence of democracy, participation, active participation from below. Student movements, the struggle of temporary workers, the popular site in defense of territories like in Taksim Gezi Park here in Istanbul, they are all forms of popular struggle that evoke social democracy on the common goods, or the common good. They remind us that democracy is conflict, above and beyond the rhetorical mystification of governance, and democracy can't survive without disagreements and tension with socio-economic conditions that are equal and worthy of everyone, a precondition for every form of pluralism and difference that isn't discrimination but freedom of expression. At the same time, I should mention that the incommensurability of mega projects represents a democratic deficit, as citizen participation is always excluded. It is stated that they are not in position to judge their value. On the 25th of June 1998 in Aarhus, Denmark, a framework of the United Nations Convention on Access to Information, Public Participation in Decision-Making and Access to Justice in Environmental Matters was signed. This convention enhances the possibility for citizens to intervene in the decision to build a mega project and give them priority to act on their input before the point of no return, as stated in Article 6.4 of the Aarhus Convention. Each party shall provide for early public participation when all options are open and effective public participation can take place. The Turkish government should ratify this convention, since Turkey is neither a party nor a signatory of the Aarhus Convention, but only participates as a member of the United Nations as an observer in the meetings of the convention. The problem of costs that are always immense. It It is important that people know of the cost of a mega project because, as stated by Sergio Giatti, a professor of environmental sciences, the hidden environmental energy and social costs of any development have been clearly pointed out by the scientific community, shedding light on misleading assessments that only count for direct operational energy costs and disregard all the indirect upstream and downstream impact categories over the entire life cycle of a given development. Disregarding or not properly accounting for indirect costs makes any assessment unreliable and actually opens the way to solutions that are much worse than the problem to be solved. Once further and more reliable information is made available, the usual process of top-down decision-making must be converted into a participatory procedure that involves all the stakeholders and the affected communities. In particular, the concept itself of feasibility must be converted from technical and economical feasibility into a more complex framework that includes aspects of post-normal science, namely the shift from the expert community to an extended peer community consisting of all those affected by an issue who are prepared to enter into dialogue on it. In our analysis, we have paid significant attention to understanding how the large companies that realize mega projects are structured. According to Ivan Ciccone, an Italian expert on public works, these companies are large virtual business and are structurally oriented toward a product that is attainable only by breaking it down into a virtual pyramid of work tied to a web of contracts and subcontracts. The mega project is the only product that allows this corporate model of a virtual company to maximize profits. Mega projects encouraged by this large company, also called post-Ford's companies, must have a value linked to the present, irrespective of the past or the future. It is the substitute for an inability to project into the future and a total disengagement from the past that is negated or removed entirely. The mega project is the most desired and consumed plate on the table of the new kickbacks in which these post-Ford companies can eat into public goods and resources together with the crooked virtual political parties of a post-Keynesian state. To close this rapid analysis of reform against the unnecessary post-mega project, it's useful to introduce the term post-normal science, for instance, the processes of democratization from a perspective of sustainability and equity. As stated by Elena Camino, an Italian professor of foundation of sustainability, post-normal science uses the systemic approach and the provisional and undetermined character of knowledge. It underlines that facts are uncertain, values are under discussion, the stakes are high, and decisions are urgent. And it does not look for a demonstration but for a dialogue, and the working method includes not only the expert but a larger peer community is involved and legitimated to bring its own knowledge. In this context, even local know-how becomes very important, as it comes from experiential knowledge that has settled for a long time in different cultures, and it has not been formalized in scientific, abstract and quantitative terms. The qualitative knowledge becomes a useful means to communicate in an open and democratic process, aiming at solving disputes and making decisions. At the end of the first forum in 2011, there was a final discussion to introduce this new category of unnecessary megaproject into struggles and political and social debate or on an international level. The goal arose to give life to a process which began well and should spread initially in Europe. This objective seems to have been achieved if we are here today in Istanbul to talk about the struggle against the UNP. In December 2010, the first European Day Against Useless Mega-Project was celebrated. It has become a recurring appointment. In December of this year, we will celebrate the third day against the unnecessary imposed mega-projects. In November 2011, during an organizational meeting in Paris that preceded the demonstration against the mega-project in Notre-Dame-des-Landes, it was decided that the second forum should take place in